This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you're struggling through the pains of alcohol or drug addiction or a mental health disorder, now's the time to seek the help that you need. Let this be an opportunity to get back on track and get back to finding the real you. You're not alone, and Promises Behavioral Health is here. They can help you through anything that you're going through. Now, we've worked with Promises for years. We know their teams personally. We have great relationships with them. And most importantly, we trust Promises. That's why we partner with them. And if we trust Promises, that means you can too. To learn more about Promises treatment options near you, for you, or your loved one, here's what you can do. Go to promises.com/soberguy. That's promises.com/soberguy. Or you can just call 888-205-1890. That's 888-205-1890. Tell them that you heard about them from That Sober Guy podcast.
That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Ramey. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. Got a great throwback episode for you today. Former Denver Broncos wide receiver Vance Johnson has got an incredible story. Been through so many ups and downs, and just wanted to reshare this conversation with you today in case you missed it or in case you're new to the show. Vance Johnson's a former NFL football player. He played for the Denver Broncos from 1985 to 1995. He also has a book out titled Uncovered: Why Becoming Less Became Everything. And he explains how hiding a serious alcohol and pill addiction for so many years literally almost cost him his life and did cost him everything he had. Talks about the loss of his son, which is just a lot in itself. And today, Vance is a recovery advocate. He opened the Vance Johnson Recovery Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I think as of recently, I read an article, I should probably put that link in the show notes for you too, just to give a little update, and I'll do that. But he's back in Tucson in the Arizona area, working with some more treatment center or with another treatment center, and continuing to speak and continuing to encourage people and families and those trying to better themselves and get their lives back on track. So, man, what a great conversation. What an honor it was to have an opportunity to talk with Vance. He's a great guy. And man, there's a lot to learn from his story and the things that he went through from being on top and just having no consequences. Just everyone said yes to him, over the years, because he was an athlete. He was a great football player. He pretty much did what he wanted for so many years. And eventually it all came crashing down around him, and he almost lost his life because of it. So, man, just really excited to share this conversation with you. Hope everybody's doing well. Before we get to Vance, really fast, you can find all of our resources at thatsoberguy.com. You can find the free 10-day guide to help jumpstart your life without alcohol. Our 30-day quit drinking do challenges on there. You can join the Sober Guy men's crew, find podcast meetings, more resources, all by going to thatsoberguy.com. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast, and anything we talk about today will be in the link. Will be linked in the show notes for you to find. So hope everybody's doing good. Thanks for continuing to follow the podcast. I hope something speaks to you today. Be sure to share the podcast with a friend. And here is former Denver Broncos wide receiver Vance Johnson. Vance, it's an honor to have you on the podcast today, man. I'm finally glad we got to connect. Thank you, my friend. How are you?
Sober Guy, what's up, man? I'm so excited to be on the show with you, man. You are so well known, and what you're doing and your transparency. I'm honored to be on your program today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. We take these topics that nobody wants to talk about a lot of the time, and just kind of hit them the best we can head on and create some good conversation around them. Hopefully we help some people. So Glad to have you here today. You have a lot going on. Want to get into a little bit about your background and your story. Obviously, football, a big part of your story, a big part of your life, and then transition now into recovery and really leading the way and helping others get sober and stay sober. I have one quick question. I saw your sobriety date is in September of 2013. Mine is the same, September of 2013 as well. So we got sober right around the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I'm September 11th, just for the record. Right on
You're
there.
September 11th?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm around the 20th.
Nice. Oh yeah. So we're just within 10 or so days, man. That's cool.
Praise God, brother. That's awesome.
Yeah. So what's going on? Tell us a little bit about, and maybe we'll backtrack a little bit, but there's a lot going on. You just opened the Vance Johnson Recovery Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. Tell us a little bit about that first, man. I was really interested in that.
Absolutely. Well, as Oglethorpe ambassador for a company that deals with people that are suffering with mental illness around the country, they have programs all over the country, whether it's Ohio, all the way to the East Coast, Texas, Louisiana. And now the Vance Johnson Recovery Center, as their ambassador, they opened up a program in my namesake, but I'm actually here and I live here. And during this COVID-19 thing, we're still in our accreditation period. So I'm living at the center. So I'm one of the only ones here besides my director who shows up once in a while. And so I'm really looking forward to opening up and partnering with yourself and people all over the West Coast so we can just keep offering and sharing hope to people that need treatment. And I'm one of those pro athletes, man, where I'm not just putting my name on a building. Yeah. I'm here. I spend time with people. I do interventions. I pick them up at the airport. I'll go get them. I'm just like you.
Yeah, man. I love it. I know I could, we chatted a little bit before today or whatever, just briefly, but I could always tell. And of course, some of the video, there's a video that someone from your team had sent me to, that involved the loss of your son, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. That's a part of your story as well. And I could feel the passion, man. And I just appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you being upfront and so honest about that. You're not just doing this to slap your name on a building to get some good PR. Like, this is what you like to do. This is what you're passionate about. And God has really given you this second chance, this second platform to help people. And it's pretty dang amazing.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And just like yourself, and we talked about it a little earlier before the show, how even though we get tired because we're doing this all day long, it actually bolsters up and fixes us up even more so in our recovery. Yeah. Because this is what we're all about now. This is not something necessarily you want to go get educated to do. This is something that if you fall into it and you come out of it, you stay in it so you can keep leading people out of the hell and that bondage of addiction, man. So by the grace of God, I'm free. I'm free indeed. Yeah,
God uses the broken. That's just the,
God. Come on, man. Start preaching. Start preaching.
Yeah.
He uses the broken. That's exactly right. That's my next devotional.
Oh, yeah, that's good. I like it. Yeah. And it's funny, though, too, like when we're going through that time, when we're grinding that out, when things are just, maybe we're at our lowest point or we're just really going through it, it's so hard to see at the time, obviously, right? We're in it, and
absolutely, man. When you're in it, you're blinded, and to the point where you feel like just killing yourself, man. Yeah. And that's why I can't wait to share my story. What I'll do is I'll start from the top and kind of go down. Yeah. And that kind of show people that just because I tried to achieve an identity, that once you get famous and once you get popular and once you get rich, you're still empty.
Yeah. So let me set this up, and I'm gonna give you the floor, and Vance, you're gonna roll with it. So, I put this in the notes here too, man. Like, looking back, you, like, at the time, just a straight winner, NCAA champ, long jumper, second round selection in the NFL draft, 3 times to the Super Bowl, Denver Broncos, Olympics. I mean, just got it going on, man. And so what happened? What's your story?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what I'll do is I'll start at the top and then I'll kind of go backwards. So, becoming that famous person, literally, I was so empty that everyone only saw the edited version. And so my identity was on the football field, was winning track meets, was winning gold medals, was making touchdowns, and was the fame. Sorry about that, man. Let me
oh, you're good.
Did I lose you?
No, you're cool. I still have audio anyways. Yeah, that's cool. Perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, people blow me up all the time, just like I'm sure they blow you up all the time. So I'll have to keep pushing that button. But so that edited version of me was just really where I wanted to be in life. But unfortunately, when I was there, the only way I could cope with life after I was off the football field or after I was off the track field was by leaning on addiction. And I didn't call it addiction at the time. I just called it a drink.
Yeah.
I just called it a pill. I just called it a little bit of weed. I just called it something that made me feel good, right? So then I'd go out and I'd party and I'd have a good time. I'd get in car accidents, but because I was famous, I'd give game tickets to the cop. I crashed one time, man, and ended up going into a hospital, and I was high. And so I begged the doctors not to let the police officers know because they came to get me. And so they hid me down by a morgue. I mean, this was crazy, man, during my career. I got arrested several times, but it wasn't really that publicized. I had a lot of domestic issues where I was so high one day after finding out that my wife was cheating on me, man, that I pushed her across the bed and I was punching the walls, and she ended up hitting her head against the closet door and she wasn't breathing. Literally, I thought she was dead. And so I had a lot of issues during my career that, you know, today people are hearing about a lot more, but back then they only saw the edited version, not the person that was suffering, not the person that literally when he came home from a Super Bowl after going to 3 of them, here's one of my accidental times of trying to kill myself here, man. So, dude, I wanted to die, man. I did everything I could to try to figure out how to leave this earth because I was so unhappy and so broken. Now I'll go to the underlying issues. And that's exactly what many of your viewers are going to be able to identify with when it comes to my story and your story, where there are these underlying issues that caused us to be who we became when we wanted to use, because that was the only way we can cope with life.
Yeah.
So as a child, I grew up around a lot of domestic violence. I grew up around a father who was a military guy, who used, who was a wife beater, who cheated on my mom, who was always drunk and always high. And so I hated him as a kid and I didn't want to be like him. So I grew up really traumatized. And the only way that I found fulfillment in my life was by, just like kids now, watching television, watching sports, watching something that made me say, you know what? I have a dream to be famous one day. I want to be rich. That's going to make me somebody. And then I want to be around this B crap that I'm growing up around because I hate this. Yeah. And so I wouldn't go to my birthday parties as a child, man. I would run away from home all the time. I would sneak in dad's room to see what he had going on in there. I found magazines with naked women. So I started out with pornography really early. I would watch people having sex on videos. But because I was a shy person, I wasn't using drugs. I didn't have any relationships. And so long story short, as I grew up as a kid, traumatized, I started to just live inside of my head to be famous. And so what I would do is, just like right now doing this COVID-19, where people are isolated and they're spending a lot of time alone. Well, when I was isolated, when I was spending a lot of time alone, all I did was work out, do push-ups and run, and just make myself, I want to be great. And so this was my goal as a child. And by the time I got to junior high school and the high school, I was one of the best in the country. I started competing around the world. I went to Caracas, Venezuela as a teenager, and I ended up winning a gold medal. So here I am, the number 1 in the world in the long jump, in track meets when I was in high school. And everything I did was about winning and about fame and about one day having security and being famous. Unfortunately, by the time I made it to college, I still hadn't drank alcohol. I still hadn't taken any pills. I hadn't smoked no weed. I started a relationship for the first time, a serious one. Ended up getting a girl pregnant, man. And her dad told me to quit sports and take care of his daughter. And I said, bye, Felicia, because I want to be famous. I ain't got time for that.
Yeah.
So I cheated on her and got another girl pregnant. And I'm at the long story short here. So before I even make it to the NFL, I got 2 women pregnant, and I'm not even in my own children's lives. Because I grew up not knowing how to be a father, not knowing how to be in a relationship, because to me, it was about making an identity. Well, by the time I blew Jerry Rice away in the 40 and beat Carl Lewis in the long jump and went to the Olympics as an alternate, I ended up having to make a choice, NFL or Olympics. So I went to the NFL, and my first game of my career, I ended up fumbling a ball, and I was told I was going to get cut. So by the time we made it back to Colorado, man, I was so broken because I was thinking about all the crap that I grew up around. Yeah. My only way to cope and deal with that was by using. And so I started using on the way to the final cut. And I didn't get cut. And I was still high. So then I'm like, oh my goodness. So whenever I'm not feeling good, I could just have a drink. And then I got introduced to painkillers. So now I'm taking different types of opioids and opiates to cope. And then I started smoking weed, man. I'm like, I'm having a blast now. And so that made me even play better on the field, because then when I was high, I was reckless. And so I was making touchdowns. I was like making all the winning catches, man.
Yeah.
So to me, this was normal, right? This was my normal, not realizing that I was trying to cope with life on life's terms by using. Another long story short, do you know, man, I was married 4 times out of the 10 years and 3 Super Bowls that I went to in the NFL.
Wow.
Because to me, since I didn't know how to be in a relationship, if someone didn't make me feel good about what I wanted, I ended up cheating on them, or I would divorce them and marry another woman, and I would cheat on them. And I had babies. I had 3 women pregnant at the same time during my career. 3 women pregnant. My wife, somebody else's wife, and another girl. So I have 3 sons right now today, man, that are 34 years old, all the same age. Wow. So my life was so chaotic during my career that the only way I could cope and deal with all these things was to use when I wasn't playing ball. And it was kind of held a secret. And when people did find out about it, because I was famous, nobody really wanted to tell Vance Johnson to stop doing what he was doing. And it wasn't until after the 10-year mark in 3 Super Bowls that I was so broken and broke financially that I just walked away from the game. And then when I didn't have an identity, the only place to go, guys, was down. And I literally, when I didn't have an identity anymore, I had to lean on more addiction. So at this point, I'm taking Adderall, I'm taking Tylenol PM, man. I'm taking everything I can, Seroquel, I'm taking antidepressant medications, I'm smoking weed, I'm drinking at least a pint or 2 or 3 a day minimum. I'm doing anything I can to not feel the brokenness that I had. And it got to a point where one day, and I'm doing a long story short, guys, 7 marriages. My son came over, he went to college to live where I was living at. I wasn't in his life like I should have been. I was paying for him to go to school, but he ended up trying to get a hold of me and he couldn't, I'm sure, and ended up taking his motorcycle and he got killed the very same night. I mean, it's hard to even talk about this because every time I share the story about my son, I stay broken. And I'm actually glad I stayed broken because it's my fault that my son died. And the only way I coped with my son dying is just like the people that are watching your show right now deal with the loss of a loved one. We use more. So I did more drugs. I did more relationships. I did more of everything to try to fill the emptiness inside of me. And it got to a point where I was just so done and so fed up with all of my life that I wanted to just kill myself. So I was driving to a canyon one day, man, and just screaming out to God to help me. And eventually, after somehow I calmed down, my 7th ex-wife then had reached out to the NFL. They called a former Tampa Bay Buccaneer who called me and told me that they would help me get into treatment. I was $1 million in debt. Now, if anybody is watching right now that was $1 million in debt, make sure you click that you were also $1 million in debt. So breaking 7 women's hearts, it being my fault that one of my children died. I'm $1 million in debt. I had nothing to live for, but God, for some reason, had grace on my life that I heard a voice in my head one day when I was crying out to God in this canyon driving that I needed to get away from me. And I listened to it. And I got on the airplane and I flew out to Florida. The NFL paid for it. And I started to listen to the stories of the other people that were in treatment. And the strangest thing is I start hearing my story. I start seeing how people were dealing with these underlying issues and a lot of trauma that they grew up in and around. And the only way they coped was by leaning on addiction. I also learned that mental health was a big problem with the majority of the people who suffered with addiction problems. And I had mental illness. You know, a person that's suicidal and a person that's using drugs and alcohol and doing anything he can to just leave this earth is a person that's struggling. The other thing I started doing was this. I started to read my Bible. And I started reading this Bible and how Jesus Christ came to die for the broken. He came to die for the sinner. He came to die for the person that was doing the stealing and the cheating and the lying. He came to die for those who needed him. And so that's the reason why I knew that this must be the only purpose that I'm alive, is to do something that's greater than myself and to turn myself over to a power greater than myself. And that's my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, I could have taken a whole hour to share the story, guys, because I got so much that I could go through so that we can identify with each other. But that's the gist of what's happened to me in my life. And only by the grace of God now, I made a promise that I would go around and share hope to all those who suffer with mental illness and with drug addiction to let them know that hope is there. and you can be free from that bondage. And to trust me and to trust my guy, sober guy, because we know, because we've been through it. And we, instead of living life happily ever after we left treatment, we're standing by the door of recovery, taking people in and showing them the way out of the hell that they're having to live in. And so with that long story short, brother, I'm going to pass it back on to you. I'd love to answer some questions, man.
Yeah, that's good, man. Thank you, Vance, so much for your honesty and just going through and breaking some of that stuff down. I think I set the record on the show for how many wows I said during the time that you were saying, wow. Yeah. I mean, good. Like it's such a testament. Like we said earlier, God uses broken people, that redemption is possible. Redemption is there for anyone who is willing, able, and for most of us at a point of pure desperation. And it sounds like in your moment, that's where it was at. It was just pure desperation. And I know for me, people ask how you got sober, why you got sober. I just felt exhausted. I felt 100% exhausted. I knew God had something more for my life, and you as well. It turns it around, and now, you know what I mean? Now we get to give back. So one quick question I have, I guess to kind of kick us off here. You mentioned when you were a kid growing up, alcoholism, I call it chaos. It was like controlled chaos or uncontrolled chaos, whatever you want to put it in my own situation, I guess. And I feel like there's so many of us that are in recovery that have been through that, have come from broken homes and had some trauma as kids. What is it, do you think, that makes us kids that have been through stuff like that feel the need to want to be known or famous or liked, or there's this certain feeling that you just feel like you want to be seen. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, and I would just love to hear your take on that.
I know exactly what you're talking about. From childhood, the very thing we're looking for is an identity. And so if we don't see our identity in our father or our mother, or if we say, I don't want to have that identity, right? It won't come out in those terms. It'll just come out like, I don't want to be like him when I grow up. Yeah. Right. So then you start hearing these voices of, well, then who the hell are you? Right. You ain't nobody. And then if you don't get attention from your mother or your father, and if you don't get the attention that you need to kind of grow you up, then you start looking for ways to make yourself and have an identity. Yeah. And so that's why when I was a kid, to me, an identity had to be something that was achieved. And it wasn't until recently that I start realizing an identity is not something achieved, it's something received. And that's the reason why I know who I am in my walk with my faith in Christ. Because my identity, knowing who I am now, if I had known that as a child, then life would have been a lot easier. I would have been able to, do a lot more things in my life. But actually, I wouldn't have. My life, your purpose was to be broken. Just like you said earlier, to be broken. Because when you got broken, that's when you found your identity. Yeah. And now you're able to use that brokenness as your purpose to go out and share hope with people. I mean, think about it, guys. Good. Everybody out there that's in recovery, everyone out there that that's suffering, their whole purpose in life is to use what they're going through as their testimony. Because otherwise, what's our use for on this earth unless we're here for a bigger purpose than just ourselves? Yes, we want to be successful. We want to have families. We want stuff. But what is it all for? Well, it's also that we can show somebody else how to deal and cope and live in life's trauma and the trials that we go through. And this is where I got to preach at you. That's why I'm a man of faith, because Jesus Christ said this: in this life, you will have trials. You will have sorrows. You will have tribulations. But in me, you will have peace because I've conquered the world. Now, when he said I conquered the world, that didn't mean he was going to make you rich and famous and prosper. That meant that you can have hope in him, that even though you're going to go through the trials, just like COVID-19, you're going to go through the tribulations, you're going to go through the sorrows and the grief from people turning their backs on you, but you're going to know that you have peace and that this life is going to be hard and you can endure it so that you can raise your children up the right way and teach them when they're young. Things are going to get tough, young man, when you get older. So daddy's going to show you how to do it now. Yeah. Young lady, I don't want you just dating any guy just because he's famous and got big muscles, right? I mean, we're supposed to raise kids a certain way, but I wasn't raised that way. I was raised with a father sticking his pee-pee in everybody and coming home drunk and then punching my mother in the face and me watching it. I was raised with him coming home and me not wanting to be around him. So I would run away from home for my birthdays. I wouldn't even stay home for my birthdays, man.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I could have talked for 2 hours, but I'm just excited to be here with you and sharing with your viewers, man. I love you guys so much. And I'm going to tell you right now, and you can't take it off because it's live. Jesus Christ loves you, and he came for the broken.
That's good, man. That's good. Let's touch on this really quick, or let's dive a little bit into this. I think this is a great point you just bring up, and it's very personal to me too. I became very good at running. A lot of us become very good at running. And so even when we get sober, even when we start to change, whether we're still going through it or whether we're in that process, constantly in process, right? I myself can still even tend to want to run through certain situations, whether it's a relationship or whether it's just a hardship, whatever. How do you think is a good approach? At least, I guess, recognizing it is number one. But in those times when the going gets tough, what's some good advice you might have for someone out there struggling?
Well, I'll tell you right now, during this COVID thing, man, alcoholism is up, suicide is up, domestic violence is up, people are smoking more weed, they're taking more drugs than ever.
Yeah.
And me and you being in recovery, we're at ground zero, man. Because we already know the stuff that we had to deal with in our past. And so, there are people out there right now who are in early recovery, who may have lost a job, who somebody's pointing at and saying, if you had just had your crap together, we wouldn't be in this mess today. And so we're still having to cope and deal with that stuff. The social isolating. I mean, I'm literally here at my treatment center with 66 beds and I'm alone most of the time here. So these fiery darts come in my head all the time. I was just at a CVS here in Las Vegas. And I walked through the CVS, man, and there was liquor. They sold alcohol. And all of a sudden, these thoughts start coming in my head. And then when I drove down the street, I had my windows open and I smelled weed and I saw a dispensary. So there are lots of temptations that come at me. Yeah. But instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to yield myself over to that, which I always yield myself over to my fleshly desires. Now what I do is I fast on life. And I know that all those things led to the wrong decisions in my life and in my head before in my past. And I wasn't going to follow those voices anymore. It's now I actually look forward to all those tough times because those tough times give me endurance so that I can continue to be that beacon of hope to people who are suffering out there. Yeah. And so the people that are in early recovery, I want you guys to focus on your walk in your faith. And that is, even if you're struggling with your faith, even cry out even more, to work on your health, to work on getting educated about addiction, get educated about mental illness, and just continue to build yourself up like muscles so that when your testimony is shared with somebody else, they say, oh my God, so you were only 2 or 3 weeks clean during COVID-19 and you stayed clean the whole time? Please come help me share with me how you did that. This is what it's all about, man. This is what it's all about. So bring on more tough times for me so I can show you how to get through it.
That's good. Let's switch gears. You mentioned fitness, or I was thinking fitness. You were going there a little bit because we're talking about emotional health and mental health. And mind you, I might as well point out that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so not a better time to even be talking about this stuff. Excuse me. At that, fitness for myself, for my wife, in the last year or so has really taken on a new thing. And it's just been such a key element, key point to not only our lives, but our families' lives. Like our kids see us like going to the gym, trying to stay healthy, we don't eat perfect, man. That's probably one of my big struggles. I still love a good cheeseburger and some pizza, man. And, but our effort in that has been better than it's ever been. And it's such a point where when I start going down that path, like you're saying, those temptations, those tough times, I can always lean on that. Like how big for you is staying healthy, staying fit, and just, physically, mentally, all that stuff combined? Well,
it's number one for me. In fact, because when I first got clean, man, I went and I ate a lot of sugars, ate a lot of food, and I had this huge belly. I lost all my body. And what I noticed, even especially recently during the COVID, is I was spending a lot of time alone. And so it was really hard having to go through that emotionally, all those thoughts. And so I challenged myself. And so this is for my brothers and sisters out there who are on social media. I want you to do a post and make a promise that you're going to start focusing on getting in shape. And you're going to post it and you're not going to delete it, because that's exactly what I had to do, because I found myself not feeling up to working out. But I said, okay, Vance, you know what? You need to post something and put some pressure on yourself so that you have to come back later on.
Some accountability.
And show people that you did it.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why, man, I'm
looking good.
Like right now, I was trying to talk myself out of working out today.
Really?
Until you just said what you just now said.
Accountability. There it is. Yeah.
So I'm going right now to the gym, which I have right here in my program, to go work out again after we do that. I work out 5 days a week, man.
That's awesome.
And I do as much as possible. I just continue to educate myself on mental illness. I try to see, instead of all these fights against all the media where you have Republicans and the Democrats, I look more on what's happening in our society that is causing people to struggle.
Yeah,
and they're losing their jobs. The families are starting to struggle. You know, you got a lot of homeless people out there that are struggling too. What can you do for somebody else to build them up during this time?
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I focus on.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. Well, we got a few minutes left. I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll talk a little bit about where folks can get in touch with you, where they can find your book, where they can reach out if they'd like to do that. I just kind of wanted to just end on hearing about how your life is today. Like you've been through so much, and now you're in this different place, this second chance that God has given you. I would love to just have you share and just give that glimmer of hope for those out there, man, to know that there is there's hope, there's a chance, and if Vance Johnson can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, you know what's really awesome about that, brother? And so folks that are listening right now, this was not scripted.
Not at all.
It was not scripted. And I just thank God for the question you just now asked me, because it leads me into this. Have you ever heard of a saying that time heals all wounds? It's a freaking lie. Time don't heal no wounds. The only thing that heals wounds is forgiveness. Because when I first got clean, in the 12 steps, 12, 8, 9, you're called to make amends with those who you've harmed, right? Well, everybody's not going to forgive you for what you did. And so what you need to do is give it time, but forgive. And so what I did was, man, I called my father, who I hated growing up, and said, Dad, I just want you to know that I forgive you. And the reason why I forgive you, Dad, is because I know you had a dad. And I know you grew up in the streets and you struggled with addiction and you struggled gangbanging when you were a kid. And so you didn't even know how to be a father. But I forgive you and I love you. And thank you for even being in my life a little bit. My father, man, just started crying when I said, I love you and I forgive you. And the other thing that did for me was, in this walk in my recovery, do you know that my children are starting to come back and forgiving me for abandoning them when they were children? They all blame me for what happened to my son. And I used myself into a coma and almost died. And they all actually, I didn't even share that part of the story. They wanted me to die. So they all said, pull the plug on him, because I was in a coma for 28 days using. But my children, man, have all started to come to say, Dad, I forgive you, man. All three of my sons, who are the same age by different women, have all been reunited in my life. The first daughter that I had, she's almost 35 years old right now. Do you know, brother? She showed up at the Vance Johnson Recovery Center.
No way.
To tell me that she forgave me.
That's awesome.
Oh, my God.
That's amazing.
I'm talking, guys, it just takes time. And time will show, because in God's grace, in prayer, and just asking him to forgive me for my sins and to restore those relationships and allowing that time to cause forgiveness to happen, that's what it's all about. Because when we just give it time, we suppress things. But in time, if we start to learn how to grow in forgiveness and pray for those that we don't like, then eventually we start having this really awesome heart to be able to just accept things and know that life is going to be tough. And so my relationships are being restored. I still have a couple sons actually that are still struggling a little bit out there with addiction. And I'm hoping somehow that they would eventually, just reach out to Dad so that I could offer something to them. and then we can maybe put their name on this facility and take mine off.
That's awesome, man. That's so good, man. Thank you for sharing that too. That's good stuff. I love it. All right. Well, if folks want to reach out to you and everyone listening too, I'll make sure to put all this in the show notes.
Okay.
VanceCares.com. We'll put the recovery center in there as well if you'd like to check that out. If anyone wants to find you, wants to reach out, any thoughts on that or where they could do that?
Yeah. Well, a couple ways. One is my Facebook page, Vance Inspires, because I'm really transparent. I'm on my page every day. I did a devotional today. I do a live stream every Wednesday. And so I'm always on my page when people want to inbox me just to talk a little bit about the different options I have available, depending on what part of the country they're in. And obviously I have my book called Uncovered, Why Becoming Less Became Everything. Because to me, it's about being humble and contrite and not trying to be some famous guy, man, that's trying to inspire athletes to be great, but literally inspire people who are broken that they can make it through. So if you want to just reach out to me, go to Vance Cares, or again, contact me on my Facebook page. I'm transparent. You can reach out to me. We can talk and we can show you the way.
Good
me
stuff.
or a sober guy or both of us.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on today, sharing a little bit and just being a great guest, man. You're awesome, dude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. I love you, man. I love your show and I'm going to keep on following you, brother.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Vance Johnson. If there's anything I can help with, you can reach out to us at thatsoberguy.com. There's a contact form there. And you can find, once again, all of our resources, like our 30-day Quit Drinking Dude Challenge. You can join the Sober Guy Men's Crew. Find additional podcasts and resources by going to thatsoberguy.com. Hope something spoke to you today. Share the podcast with a friend. Shout out to Humans Music. Love those guys. Peace, love, and respect, and keep your blood clean. With your